everyone, welcome back to Let's Take FGO Wanted, the show where we let you know if you want to roll that 5-star. Now, normally, every episode of Wanted, I start by explaining what the show is in case it's your first time, and I would say that normally, on an episode of Wanted, we talk about a character, a servant, in FGO, in case you couldn't piece that part together, but we talk about their real-life history and folklore, their in-universe lore, their mechanics, and more. But today is one of those special exceptions. We're doing a crossover character today, so there's not really any real-life history other than the real-life publication history of Nasu and Type Moon. So we're much more focused on the universe lore today with 5-star foreigner, AOZAKI AOKO. So we're just going to jump straight into it. So, in my notes, skipping straight from history to lore, if you want to talk about her lore within the Nasuverse, AOKO goes all the way back to the beginning. The novel version of Mahou Tsukai no Yoru, usually abbreviated Mahoyo, comes from 1996. This is pre-Type Moon. I think Nasu started writing it in high school, and even though he wrote about 400 pages, it did not get published. There are actually like 5 print copies, I think, in the world of his original draft, but yeah, it was his, prototype novel that kicked off a lot of ideas for the Nasuverse, a lot of stuff that would go into later Type Moon productions, but obviously was, at the time, unpublished. Now, eventually, Takeuchi, one of the artists and now art director at Type Moon, convinced Nasu to adapt Mahoyo into a visual novel after the success of Tsukihime and Fate Stay Night. It was originally intended to come out in 2009, announced in 2008, but was delayed until 2012. And a remastered version was released in 2022 for Switch and PS4 digitally. The physical edition and the Steam edition came out in 2023. The physical edition for PS4 is what I own. Wider audiences, though, were introduced to her earlier before the actual remaking of Mahoyo, as AOKO AOZAKI shows up briefly in Tsukihime as the mentor of Tonoshiki. He calls her sensei. She gives him the Mystic Eye Killer glasses, stolen from Toko, her sister, teaches him the value of living things, and does a couple of other, important things in the prologue, and then shows up usually in the epilogues, depending on how things are going on. She also has a much more pronounced role in the Melty Blood side of the franchise, the fighting game spin-off to Tsukihime, as befitting a character with such destructive power. And she has had cameos sprinkled throughout other Type Moon productions, of course, over the years, as she is, kind of one of the big core original characters to Nasu's ideas. To give you her in-universe biography, AOKO is the younger daughter of the AOZAKI family of mages. She is described as clumsy and carefree, looking like an effortless, superhuman type, but she's actually the hard-working type. She puts in a lot of effort, even though she makes it look effortless. She is described as being of below-average capacity as a magus, because she's a Type Moon protagonist. Seriously, has there ever been an actual core protagonist of a Type Moon production who was good at magic? Anyway, the exception to that is that her ability in pure destruction is absolutely unparalleled. If you are just a Fate head and have not tried something like Tsukihime or Mahoyo, think of it this way. You know how Shiro is about swords? That's AOKO with blowing things up. It's her one neat trick. Ostensibly, her style of magic is based on numerology, but mostly in the sense that she uses magic math to create rotations in her magic circuits and fires spells like bullets, detonates them like fireworks, or makes them move like rotating stars. So, it's math in the same way that, a physics sim to show you what a black hole looks like is math. That is technically math, but other people are going to be way more impressed with the other bits. Now, originally, AOKO's older sister, Toko, is the heir under their grandfather to the AOZAKI clan, but when AOKO is 15, her grandfather named her the successor. Instead, Toko is cut out of the inheritance. AOKO is told to abandon her ordinary life and, become a magus full-time. By age 17, she's still an apprentice magus under Alice Kuonji, a witch in Misaki Town. Somebody threatens the bounded field protecting the Misaki Town territory, and AOKO embarks on an investigation into the source, and this is, of course, Mahoyo. If you want to know more of that, check it out. Available everywhere now. And of course, because she is shown later in the timeline in several pieces, before the production of the Mahoyo VN, some of the outcomes we do get to know ahead of time. It is a very famous Nasuverse fact to bring up, is talking about the true magic and the number of them. And so, we know that AOKO is not only the successor of the AOZAKI clan, but also she is the one to reach the 5th magic, one of the 5 highest mysteries in the magecraft world. The short version of this, if you don't want to go digging through our archives for when I've explained it previously as a aside in our podcast, is that Magecraft replicates things that humans know how to do just with magic. You can use Magecraft to fly because humans can fly using planes. It's just that magic would let you do it much simpler and easier. You know, you would say some magic words, ideally expensive energy, and do something that normally takes billions of dollars or whatever. You know, starting a small fire is nothing because you can light a match. Magic, capital M, usually referred to as true magic in translations to make it much more clear, is the performing of genuinely impossible miracles, doing things that are currently not replicable with human technology and ingenuity. Things that were previously the realm of gods, but now that there aren't any more of those, allegedly, it's, you know, a genuine ability. Now, the fifth magic, called Magic Blue, has to do with the displacement or deception of time, and is linked to concepts like consumption and extinction. Using its abilities, AOKO can manipulate the time axis. She can move through time, she can displace time, she can edit timelines, she can fuck with time on like the microsecond level to create anti-purge defense, and she can also borrow time. She can translocate time from other sources. Again, something that normally we humans cannot do at all. Barely understand. So her super mode, Super AOKO, we'll talk more about that later, is usually herself giving herself the knowledge and abilities of her future selves. Activating the fifth magic also permanently halted her aging at 20. The fifth magic is described as being linked to or similar to Ars Almadel Salmonelis, which either works in similar principles or is the step leading towards the fifth magic. Now, obviously, some of you might be like, oh, isn't that just a big beam? No. The actual effect of Ars Almadel is to, you know, generate such vast amounts of energy by consuming human history that you can go back to the beginning of time, sort of a thing. So they're linked, but not exactly the same. Now, the AOZAKI sisters, I mentioned Toko earlier, have a pretty fraught relationship, but it seems that after Toko loses in Mahoyo, she settles down to them just being more catty. AOKO steals Toko's Mystic Eye Killers in certain timelines. Toko runs up builds with the Mages Association on her sister's credit card, that kind of thing. They do apparently, though, actually talk, at least to a point where that in Strange Fake, Francesca calls AOKO in to negotiate a ceasefire between her and Toko, because Toko is very upset at Francesca and keeps killing her, so she has to get AOKO to call her off. Remember, do not piss off Toko. Now, FGO is not AOKO's first cameo in Fate. In Fate Extraverse, she is a wizard, which is what we call computer magic users, who's located at the chapel in Seraph, and she can perform Alteration of the Soul. This lets you edit and improve your servant's parameters, you know, normal buff stuff. She's apparently not very good at it, but she's offering it anyway. Toko is also an NPC rattling around, but she's too busy doing side plots and like setting you up for the double secret boss to actually do Alteration of the Soul, which she's, you know, apparently much better at. We would love to see more, but Extra Record did get indefinitely delayed recently, Sag, so if there's any more to comment about the extra timeline, the EX universe, no more of that. That said, do keep your eyes peeled. We will be getting a film adaptation by Ufotable of Mahoyo sometime this year. They've, you know, recently announced that they are still working on it. And obviously, we're talking about AOKO because she's about to debut in FGO as the headliner for a FGO collab and be featured very heavily in that event, which is subtitled or possibly super titled. I don't actually know what we call the, you know, do we list the Mahoyo X FGO first or what? Anyway, it's the Kimono Hot Springs murder case, so she's involved in this scenario. Now, I'm actually glad that the lore section was pretty straightforward because describing the mechanics are going to be a bitch. I'm basically doubling my graphics, which was, in fact, a huge pain in the ass. So, AOKO is a foreigner because the true magic is hella outside the domain. She generally has higher attack, lower HP. She is QAABB. Average hit counts, average NP gain, 0.55. Little above average, honestly. Now, describing her NP is going to be the inflection point. That's where we're going to switch, so don't worry about that yet. The short version is going to be that she transforms into Super AOKO, which completely alters her kit, so we're going to describe the default version first. Her first skill is Magic Bullets. This gives her 3 stacks of bullets, and the way the bullets work is 1 bullet is expended whenever you land a Quick Arts or Buster attack for 50% attack up first. If it is an extra attack, she consumes all of her bullets to get 50% attack up for each Also, using magic bullets gives you 10 to 20 stars. Now, this has a minimum cooldown of 2. So load early, load often, gang. Second skill is a 10 to 20% NP regeneration for the whole team for 3 turns and 5 to 10 stars per turn. Note this is a regen buff, not an NP per turn buff on each member. So it is a buff that is on AOKO, which gives everybody the 10 to 20%. And also, specifically, when you switch to Super AOKO, this buff, this regen buff, is lost. It's gotten rid of. We'll explain why later. Third skill is a targetable buff, which gives an ally 20 to 30% arts, quick, buster, and crit up. Gives them 1k to 3k HP per turn, and for all 3 turns gives a special protagonist correction buff. This blocks most demerits on skills or NP that apply to the self anyway, not that apply to enemies like for Kyuhime stalking. But this does not prevent the ones that really fuck your shit up, like Sacrifice and Eternal Sleep, okay? So, like, it doesn't break the game balance, but it does negate a wide variety of demerits. And her NP in the original state, the unfinished blue, allows her to transform into Super AOKO for the rest of the fight. You stay transformed until the fight is over. It grants her permanent, though I do not believe unremovable, buffs to Buster and Extra based on NP level, because AOKO now does AoE damage on those cards. Her overcharge effect is crit up for 3 turns. It does say permanently, so they might actually be unremovable buffs as well. But yeah, your extra attacks and buster attacks are now AoE as Super AOKO, so they do extra damage. Now, let us transition to looking at the differences between normal and Super AOKO. Now, as Super AOKO, she has her own stats, including switching to being the star attribute, if that matters. She is better on attack than HP. She has worse NP gen, it's down to 0.33, but slightly better star gen. And also, to make up for the fact that she has an AoE buster, switches to QAAAB deck. So, you cannot string multiple buster AoEs together. Honestly, probably for the better. Her first skill now grants 6 bullets.
6 bullets. More than enough to kill anything that moves.
A 1-turn invul, and 3 turns of 20 to 30% arts up on self. As a result, though, the cooldown is now 4 turns minimum, so you gotta use it a little better. Second skill is just fuck you, 50 to 100% battery and 20 to 40 stars. I will fire my NP, die. And that's important because her third skill is basically her third NP. So she has a normal NP as normal AOKO. She has an NP as Super AOKO, which we're going to talk about in a second, because again, there's 2 of them. But also, her third skill consumes 100% of NP charge, can only be used when you have at least 100% charge. And gives 30 to 50% buster up and 51% extra up for 5 turns on self. And gives the other party members 30 to 50% charge and -2 skill cooldown and heals everybody for 3k to 5k. So, if you don't need to be using her Noble Phantasm, you can just be like, I've got a buster card coming up. Or I can string together 3 arts cards and get a cool extra AoE. You can just do that instead. Super AOKO's actual NP is AoE arts, and it is true damage in the purest form. You're looking at Pierce Invul and Ignore Death for 1 turn first. And it deals bonus damage based on the number of magic bullets you have, though it consumes your 10 most recent magic bullets to do. And the overcharge effect is defense down for 3 turns first. Passives are Domain E, Territory E, and Item Creation E, so 2 stars per turn, a little bit of debuff protection, a little bit of arts up, a little bit of debuff success, plus Magician C, which gives you a 20% passive debuff resistance, instant kill resistance, buff removal resistance, and we convert invuls into anti-purge defense. That's why, verbally, there's a little asterisk next to that invul, because that's in both modes. Additionally, when she's Super AOKO, she adds 2 new passives. One of which is Reloading, which gives her 2 magic bullets per turn, and the second is a passive version of her second skill in baseline, which gives the whole party 10% NP per turn and 3 more stars for a total of 5 stars per turn overall. And AOKO is a crazy unique servant, but she's hard to build around. You basically, to do the most damage, want to stockpile bullets, charge her NP, fire it, and spend those bullets either in crazy damaging AoE buster or extra attacks to wipe enemy waves, or on her AoE NP, which deals bonus damage based on the number of bullets and then consumes them, But in a pinch, she can offer great team support. Basically, the way you want to work with this is you don't want to waste bullets unless you have to. Now, normal AOKO can, with her shorter cooldown and extra attack combos, hammer down on single enemies, because I should note that much like Musashi's hit count altering, AOKO making her own attacks AoE reduces the individual power among all enemies. Also, by the way, fun fact, I forgot to include it in my notes, but I'll say it here. Crit chance is basically rolled separately for each enemy, so if you don't have 100%, you might crit one guy in a AoE attack and miss the other two, or however many there are. So keep that in mind. On the other hand, the buffs Super AOKO gets on her AoE Buster and AoE extra attacks will mean that you will be tearing through farming in ways you could never imagine on just one single Buster. She's like the farming version of Super Orion type shit, like, I don't even need to fire my damaging NP to kick your ass kind of thing. Now, this means that for team comp, you're probably going to want to pair her for chargers. She has a lot of arts cards, so that's probably 1 or 2 Castorias. Waver, of course, is card agnostic, so you can get 50% charge and generic stuff like damage plus, damage cut for your team. And there's a few budget options as well. But if you're just going to do like Super AOKO pass, like you're going to instantly switch to Super AOKO and just stockpile bullets, you're going to want some battery. On the other hand, AOKO Super or otherwise is basically also a pseudo support with her, third skill is Super AOKO and her third skill is normal AOKO. You can do a lot of funny stuff. So you can pair her with more reliable farmers or with single target units and basically hold down the fort, and then she can expend her NP charges Super AOKO to heal and cooldown reduce the team while just, juicing her normal attacks. So you've got a lot of different ways you can work with her, but they're all going to be a little kitschy, a little touchy to work out. For CEs, K-Scope works. Black Grail also works since her second NP is damaging. You can also mix things up in a few ways. Generally, I would probably recommend using your CEs that are both Arts and Buster ups to pair off. Obviously, if you start with a 50%, you can make that work with your Chargers a lot better. But you don't, if you're leveling all of her skills anyway, we'll talk about that in a second, you don't necessarily need to have a baseline charge if you have battery chargers for her. Because if you just make her go Super AOKO has a 100% battery on her. So, you can just pull the trigger. Bang, bang, sort of thing. But, on the other hand, depending on what you're doing, you might want it. Giving her just Buster up feels kind of like, not quite putting all your eggs in one basket, but you only have one Buster card that's going to come up in rotation. Yes, it will be really good because it's her AoE, and she gets a buff to it from both her third skill if she chooses to spend NP charge that way and from switching to Super AOKO. But again, you never know when you're going to get that card to come up. So, you might just be dumping into arts cards as well to charge NP. So you got to keep that all in mind. Very fun, but again, going to be a little kitschy, not going to be useful to everybody, and it does want some extra NP levels. And this takes us, of course, to the vaunted other stuff. Now, as a foreigner, AOKO doesn't need statues, but for both Ascension and skills, she's going to need the new Ether Photons. They're only one story drop back, so I hope you've been saving up. She's also going to need a bucket full of Comet Shards for both in there, so you're going to be keeping that in mind, and I think maxing her skills is going to be very important for this. Obviously, you're getting a 2-for-1 deal because you're maxing both her normal mode skills and her Super AOKO skills at the same time. Those aren't two separate tracks. But it's still important to be leveling them. Who can say no to plus 100% battery? Plus, 2-turn skill cooldown? It's crazy. And also, as I did mention, extra NP levels are important, so how are we going to grab them? Well, AOKO is going to debut during the Mahoyo X FGO Collab. It's going to happen soon. I'm, recording this before the broadcasting station goes up, which will give us an exact date, but it'll be around there. She also should get a extra banner around New Year's this year, maybe Thanksgiving, maybe like school's back, something, but she was part of the rotation for New Year's in Japan, so it should be around then to get an extra rate up at the end of the year. And next year, she's going to be in the Weekly Foreigner and the Grand Duel Extra campaigns. There's all that stuff going on around where everybody gets a shot. That said, since the Mahoyu movie is scheduled for later this year, it's very likely JP will arrange another rate up, so you should have at least another chance 2 years from now, and we'll see how that's going on. Plus, as a limited SSR servant, she will be available in all GSSR summon campaigns for at least the foreseeable future. And that's what I got. I'm Dai. Thank you forever. I'll see you in a week for Alice, but we are getting a little work crunched out here. But if you liked Wanted, give it a like. Leave your comments down below about how you're doing. You can join our Discord as well. We have a roll thread. If you want to check out what's going to go on in Mahoyo, we did a pregame on our podcast, Let's Like FGO, which, by the way, we have a podcast. You can follow the various YouTube links to there as well, or check out the channel. And if you want to know more about how we feel about the story event, also be sure to check out the podcast. We are also recapping the latest story drop, id, because Audio Call 2 also just came out. And if you're interested in those servants, I put out one for those guys. And, it's a whole thing. Anyway, please watch content. Maybe watch the short about the pre-release for this stuff. Thank you. Anyway, that's all of our usual stuff, so I'm going to also remind you, in addition to maybe ring the bell, maybe join the channel memberships, you can support us on Patreon and get this episode early. I have shout-outs to our highest level patrons, but that will come after our musical outro. And before we go, a special shout out to all of our patrons, but especially Adam DeHarp, Blackest OG, Call Me Zed, Carlos, Dragon, JW9000, Rise of Genji, Rogue Garment, and Charvor. If you like what we do and want to see us do more, consider supporting us on Patreon.